Have you ever wondered what sparked the recent conflict between Israel and Hamas? The news headlines are filled with reports of escalating violence and war, yet the origins of these tensions are often left unexplored. Understanding the roots of this conflict is key in grasping the complexities of today's world. Dive deep into the chronicles of history with us to find out. The Israel-Hamas conflict did not just emerge overnight, it is a manifestation of decades-long tensions. To understand the depth of this conflict, we need to take a step back in time to the establishment of Israel in 1948. This move, backed by the United Nations, saw a large influx of Jewish immigrants into Palestine, leading to the displacement of many Palestinians and the start of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Fast forward to 1987, the First Intifada, a Palestinian uprising against Israeli occupation in the West Bank and Gaza, was in full swing. It was during this period of unrest that Hamas, an Islamist political organization and militant group, was born. Hamas, an acronym for Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, or Islamic Resistance Movement, was seen as a symbol of Palestinian resistance to Israeli occupation. Over the years, the conflict between Israel and Hamas intensified, with major confrontations occurring in 2008, 2012 and 2014. The 2008 conflict, also known as the Gaza War, saw a 3-week armed conflict that resulted in significant casualties and damage. The 2012 conflict, referred to as Operation Pillar of Defense, was an 8-day Israeli operation in Hamas-governed Gaza. The operation was launched in response to over 100 rocket attacks on Israel by Hamas and other Islamic militants. In 2014, the conflict escalated into a 7-week war, known as Operation Protective Edge. This operation was marked by the heaviest fighting seen to date, with over 2,000 casualties reported in Gaza. Throughout these conflicts, the world watched with bated breath as attempts at ceasefires and peace agreements came and went, each failing to bring about lasting peace. The tension escalated to its peak this year, with the largest wave of coordinated attacks in recent years. The intensity of this conflict was triggered by a shocking raid by militants based in Gaza. The tension had been growing for a while, a tinderbox waiting for a spark. The blockade of Gaza, the Israeli raids in the West Bank, the violence at the Al-Aqsa holy site, all stirred the pot of unrest. The attacks by settlers on Palestinians fueled the flames of resentment and anger. Simmering beneath these acts of aggression were the deep-seated issues of land, identity, and sovereignty. Years of defiance and resistance had hardened into a resolve that was difficult to break. The militant group Hamas saw this as a call to arms and responded with a wave of attacks that took everyone by surprise. The raid was brutal and unexpected. Hamas militants launched rockets into Israeli towns, infiltrating communities and causing havoc on land, sea, and air. They abducted civilians and soldiers, causing a death toll that reached into the hundreds. This was a major escalation, the likes of which had not been seen in years. The response was swift and severe, leading to a full-blown war. The war that ensued was unlike any other seen in recent years. Israel, finding itself under a coordinated wave of attacks from Gaza, declared a state of war. The sudden surge of violence was initiated by Hamas, and it wasn't long before the effects were felt far and wide. A major attack resulted in the tragic death of a woman and injuries to 15 others, igniting a firestorm of retaliation from the Israeli military. The response was swift and fierce, with targets in Gaza being struck with precision. The Israeli Defense Forces, calling up reservists, stood strong against the onslaught, their goal clear: to protect their country and its citizens. But as the war raged on, a call resonated from the heart of the conflict. Hamas military commander Mohammed Deif urged Israeli Arabs, neighboring Arabs and Palestinians within Israel to join the fight. It was a call to arms, a plea for unity against a common enemy. This appeal echoed throughout the region, added a new layer of complexity to an already intricate and volatile situation. The war waged on day and night, with the world watching and waiting, hoping for a cessation of hostilities. Each day brought with it a rising tide of violence, the toll of human life increasing with each passing hour. Civilians caught in the crossfire found themselves in a nightmare that seemed to have no end. As the conflict escalated, so too did the devastation. Homes were reduced to rubble, families torn apart, and lives forever changed. The human cost of this war was evident in the faces of those who survived. their eyes telling a story of loss, fear, and uncertainty. The war has resulted in devastating losses on both sides, with the death toll still rising. The echoes of this conflict will resonate for years to come, a stark reminder of the price paid when diplomacy fails and war takes its place. So, what are the key points to remember from this conflict? First, it's important to understand the history of the Israel-Hamas conflict. This is a long-standing issue with tensions between the two parties dating back several decades. Issues such as the blockade of Gaza, Israeli raids in the West Bank, violence at the Al-Aqsa holy site, attacks by settlers on Palestinians, and the growth of settlements have all contributed to the friction and ultimately led to this outbreak of war. Secondly, the triggers leading to the current conflict are crucial. The war was sparked by a wave of coordinated attacks by Hamas, which were the heaviest in years. These attacks included rockets being launched into Israel, armed gunmen infiltrating Israeli communities, and reports of attacks by land, sea, and air. This shocking cross-border raid resulted in a significant number of casualties and ultimately led to Israel declaring a state of war. Lastly, we must not forget the devastating effects of the war. The death toll has reached into the hundreds for both Israel and Gaza, with civilians on both sides caught in the crossfire. Residential buildings have been significantly damaged, and the Israel Defense Forces are striking targets in Gaza, in retaliation, with a potential ground assault being considered. To summarize, the conflict between Israel and Hamas is deeply rooted in history, triggered by recent attacks, and has resulted in devastating loss and destruction. The international community has been watching closely, with many calling for an immediate end to the violence. The situation is still developing, and we can only hope for a peaceful resolution soon.